Hi designers, thank you for joining us on Makers Row Live. Today I am hosting the live event, super exciting. And before we get started, today's a very exciting day. Today is the day that Embark Live launches officially. So if you are watching today's live event, you can enroll on embarklive.com with the promo code ANNA, A-N-N-A. And I'm gonna go ahead and pin all of this information, who I am, how you can contact us, information about Embark, and that will all be there. Let me pin it. Cool. All right, so that is who I am, my company name, Embark Live, the promo code, and then how you can reach me through Makers Row. If you would like to set up a consultation, we do 20-minute complimentary consultations. So that's the whole intro. Embark Live, launching. How exciting. Go check it out. I've got a ton of videos up there with just other information, Q&As that designers have asked me in the past. So it's super informative. And then if you want to work with any of the experts that they have on Embark, there's like a little button to hire us and we can talk specifics with you on your company. So yes, very exciting news. All right, so today we are talking about the inside scoop on being an entrepreneur and how I started V.Mora. So normally, if you guys have been watching, this has been more informative, like I've got a checklist, I'm giving you 5 points, but today I am talking about myself. So that's a little bit more uncomfortable for me, right? Because I'm not giving you just like 5 points on how to work with your factory or how to source fabric. So, but that is part of an example of being an entrepreneur, is to put yourself in these situations that are uncomfortable so that you can grow, so that you can learn. And I've had a lot of valuable lessons that I've learned throughout being an entrepreneur. And by me not sharing them and having these experiences for you guys to listen to, that's me being selfish, right? So I can teach you guys what I've learned, take you through my story, and hopefully then you'll get something out of it and be able to apply it to your own fashion industry business. So yeah, a little bit about me. Ever since I was little, I had an entrepreneur spirit. My grandmother, I used to like make friendship bracelets, and she'd be like, you should sell those. And I was like, but what if they say no? And she would say, you go to the next door. And that's just such a valuable lesson of like, who cares if somebody says no, or if somebody doesn't want to buy your product? Go to the next door. That's something that I've always carried over. So I did. I remember I made $80 selling friendship bracelets in the neighborhood. And that was like a good lesson for me as an entrepreneur when I was little, just to know that it's okay if people say no, and that if you're putting yourself out there and you're willing to hear no, then you've got there's more room for success, right? Somebody's going to say yes. You just have to find the right customer. So, I always was raised kind of with that spirit. My grandmother too, I've shared this before, but I watched her at, I think she was 65 or 67, I can't remember, but she started her own company and she owned a bakery. And at 67 years old, we were all scared to death of her. She was like the boss of our family. And she did all of this paralyzed from the neck down, right? So she got polio when she was 26. She had 3 little young daughters, and it left her paralyzed from the neck down. She could move the fingers on her left hand. So this is before technology was really up and running like it is today. She would have a field day. I used to have to lay on the floor and like turn the pages of a book while she would read it, because it was before audio books. Like now she'd be able to like absorb so much information. Anyway, so she had a phone and she would press the buttons with her left hand, and she had a headset and she would boss everyone around. And she never used her disability. I don't even think she liked us using the word disability. yeah, I don't, this is before that word. I know that that's not a word that's usually used anymore, but handicap she didn't like either. But she never used that as an excuse. And she never used that. Anyone that knew the bakery, anyone that ran into her as a business owner, they didn't know. They didn't know that she was doing all of this from her bed. She did it one time. One time we had a health inspector. He was just like a super mean guy, and he was at the bakery, and he's like, well, why don't you get your lazy butt down here into your own business? And she's like, I would, but I'm paralyzed from the neck down, so I have to trust my employees. And that shut him up. But other than that, I never heard her use that in any way to make people feel sorry for her or make people, it was just part of life for all of us, for her. So when I was old enough to have my own company, I went to school for fashion design. After that, I worked at a bar for a long time while I was a buyer at a small boutique, and I learned the business side of things. And from there, I went and worked at a custom design shop, and I learned how to sew really, really well. This Iraqi woman who had, been sewing since she was 12. She was amazing. And she didn't want to teach me. She did not that she didn't want to teach me, but it was definitely like a Karate Kid moment. I remember I cut fabric. It was like $600 a yard. I cut it on the wrong grain, and I ruined it. I ruined the fabric. And the designer came in and just laid one on me, and she watched me like this the whole time. And I looked at her and I was like, Sonia, you watched me do that. And she said, you will never do that again. And she was right. That was the last time I ever cut fabric off grain. I did cry for a little while, and she then looked at me and she said, how old are you? And I was like, 24. And she was like, too old to cry like a baby. And I went in the bathroom, cried a little bit more, but realized that she was right. Right? Like, in order to be successful in this world, I'm going to mess up. I'm going to get upset. And I have to learn from those experiences and move forward. And from that moment on, I decided that Sonia was going to teach me to sew and do patterns because I knew it was going to be valuable for my career. This is a talent that I feel isn't passed on to our generation. Even Sonia herself didn't teach her daughters to sew because it wasn't a good life for her, and she wanted better for her children. So being able to be a seamstress and pattern maker, I saw as a valuable way to be in the fashion industry today. So I decided, Sonia is going to teach me her skills. And she gave me a button-up shirt, little tiny stripes on it. And every single mistake, she'd say, take it out, do it over. Take it out, do it over. And I'm talking each line had to match on the seams. Each stitch had to be perfect on the inside and on the outside. And it took me 40 hours, an entire week, 8 hours a day, to finish that button-up shirt. And when I was done, I handed it to her, all cocky, because I knew, this is perfect. She looked at it for 2 seconds, put it down, and she goes, make another. And I was like, oh my God. I was livid. But I did it, because that's what she was teaching me. That second shirt took me 6 hours flat. It was perfect. And to this day, cut, sew, make a button-up shirt, 6 hours flat. And that was a skill that I learned from Sonia. So it was a tough experience learning with her, but it was absolutely worth it. And I've taken those skills on for my whole career. And then from there, I started my own clothing line because I had the pattern making skills, the sewing skills. I could make my own samples, and I had been a buyer, so I was familiar. This is back when trade shows were popular. You'd go to trade shows, you sold wholesale. This is 2008, yeah. So I did that. I put together a line. I sewed the samples. I put together a line sheet, a lookbook. I did some trade shows. But while I was doing that, I was still bartending. I love the service industry. Like, it's a great way. You're kind of an entrepreneur, right? Like, if I wanted to go to work and I needed to make money, I would hustle and like work really well with my tables and take tables from other servers if they wanted. So it was a way that I was in control of my own income because it was directly related to how hard I worked. So I was a bartender and waitress well into 2010. So 2 years into owning my own company, I had employees, and I'd be like, okay, I gotta go to work. And they would continue to work while I went and served tables. So the point of that is just, I was willing to do whatever I needed to make this work. And that meant at that time, working, creating my business, doing what I could, and bartending at the night shifts. And so while I was doing that, I was also sewing patterns and samples for other designers because I had the skill. I could meet with a designer, understand what they were trying to put together, and then be able to create it for them in the patterns and samples. And through doing that, I really loved it. I loved when a designer would come with an idea and I was able to sketch it for them and then put it into pattern and sample and make this garment for them. And they would come to the fittings and they would cry because this was an idea that they had in their head for I don't know how long, but I was able to pull it out of their brain and present it to them. And I got so much gratification, and I loved it. I loved working with the designers. So slowly but surely, I started taking on more designers, helping them with more things, with factories, with trade shows, with fabric sourcing. And I let go of designing my own line. I did my own line for 2 seasons, and I just focused on working one-on-one with the designers. I understand the creative brain and I have a business brain, but I feel like I am stronger, me personally, in this kind of business mindset, taking this creativity and pulling it into the logistics of a business. And through working with clients, you guys are strong in the creativity or the idea, and then I'm able to pull that into a business concept. So I loved doing that. I just love doing that more, and I think I'm better at it. So I started doing that, and then, it wasn't always... it's never easy, right? But there were times I remember, and I share this story because I shared it once on a whim, and then someone came back to me years later and was like, I remember you saying that story, and I had that moment, and your story helped me. So I share this story for that reason. There was another month that I was living in Rogers Park. My rent was $500 a month, and I didn't know how I was going to pay rent. And it had happened. This is after I took the jump and I was no longer bartending. I was like, I'm going to focus on V.Mora. And I took this leap, and it was scary. It was scary. And there was a month I had a few days, 5 days maybe, to figure out how I was going to pay rent. And it had happened one too many times. And I was just devastated. I was just devastated. And I remember I was at my coffee table on my knees and I was sobbing. And I was just exhausted because I felt like I had been working so hard. And here I am again. I can't pay my rent. And little did I know that all of the things that I had been doing on the back end, working with the clients, getting, networking, the fabric vendors that I knew, all of that was snowballing. And I was right around the corner of, where I would be able to break through. But I didn't know that. In that moment, I just knew I couldn't pay rent. So I had this voice come over me to be like, listen, it's probably my grandmother's voice. Let's say it was my grandmother's voice or Sonia's voice, one of the two. They came in and they're like, you can cry for 5 more minutes and then you're going to figure this out. You're going to figure out if you can get any freelance jobs, anything that you can do, and you are going to pay rent. So I did exactly that. I remember looking at the clock and saying, okay, 5 more minutes, I can sit here and have my little pity party and cry. And then after that, I'm going to pick myself up and I'm going to figure this out. So I did that. I often throw myself pity parties sometimes when I like want to just like do nothing and cry. That it always helps to just do that, get it out of my system, and then I can focus on whatever I have to do again. So 5 minutes, and then I got up and I found my neighbors needed curtains sewn for their house, and I found someone that wanted to do someone's hair, like cut and style it for a photo shoot. And I remember that was $250, and then the curtains, I think I got must have gotten $250 because I made my rent that month. And then shortly after that, I started getting calls from people that had been referred to me by Jay Abertman. He owns a Chicago, just look Jay Abertman, I'm going to say Chicago Wholesale Fabrics, I believe. Anyways, a fabric vendor in Chicago started referring my name because he had seen so many clients come in that had been working with me that were happy, that had patterns and samples that looked good. And I started getting calls from those people. And that at that moment, that's when V.Mora really took off. And I look back at that coffee table moment, and I know without a doubt, like that's when most people quit. They're like, it didn't work. Here I am again. And that's when most people quit, right before this, the snowball comes into effect and things start happening. I didn't know all of that was coming. I didn't know that my name started being referred. I didn't know any of that. But I continued. I decided for one last push. I was like, I'm going to do this one last push. And then everything started happening. And I didn't know that in the moment. But had I quit, I wouldn't have ever found that out. So I share that moment because that isn't unfortunately, not the only time in my business where, things got rough, especially in today's environment. But I can always look back on that moment and be like, if you can get through this, you don't know what's on the other side. You don't know what's about to happen. So, yes, I probably, you too will have that moment of, I failed, this isn't working, I have to quit. And if you can kind of just evaluate, do you have one more push in you? Can you figure something else out? Can you look at what's working and see if you can if there's any other way that you can look at your business at that moment to give this final push? Because it happens as a business owner. It happens. So I share that moment. After that, shortly after that, I was still working out of my home, and I had a client show up for his 9 a.m. I think it was at 5:30 in the morning because he had drove through the night from Indiana, and he got there early. And at that time, I was like, I need a studio space. And that was really scary for me too, because it was an added expense to my business. So I had someone tell me that sometimes you have to act as if and then let everything catch up. So I took that leap. I got a studio in Ravenswood, and it was a little tiny studio, but having the studio space made me take myself more seriously, and clients take me more seriously. My apartment wasn't like something to show off where I was at. So I always was like a little embarrassed to have like these designers creating $5,000 gowns coming to like my little apartment. So having the studio space helped me go to that next level in my business. And I only stayed in that studio space for 1 year before I grew out of it. 1 year, and then I got a bigger studio space because then I could have employees. They didn't have to have keys to my apartment, which is crazy. I could have employees. They could be working while I wasn't there. I could have more clients and fittings, things like that. So I had this studio space in Chicago, and at that time, I see there's questions, so I will get to those at the end for sure. I'm almost done. I'll wrap up soon. So I had one of my employees say, I'm moving to New York, so this is my 2 weeks. And again, I like thought outside of the box of like, we get a lot of buttons and trims and things like that from New York. Why don't you continue working for V.Mora and go to New York and you can help with our sourcing? And that quickly turned into having the New York office, because one of the vendors had spaces. We got a little table and chair. I think it was like for $250 a month rent, because it was just a desk. And since it's still the same office I have today, but since now we have the whole office, so that branched out into my New York office. Then 5 years ago, I moved to New York and decided to transfer all of my business to New York. I love Chicago, and Chicago is my home forever. But being in New York in the fashion industry and just like having everything, I want to share another something too. When I first opened my company, I expanded quite rapidly, and I got to the point where I had 3 offices and like 20 to 25 employees. But what I noticed in that moment was, yes, I had more staff, I had more offices, I had more clients, but it was harder for me to keep a quality control on what the staff was doing, what was going out for clients, and my profit margins were smaller. So what I've since done is I've really honed it in. I keep my overhead as low as possible, and we have contractors instead of employees. I now contract things out that I used to have employees do, like my website, accounting, bookkeeping, things like that. That was very useful, and it came in handy too with COVID, because my expenses were so low. It keeps me in a safer place if all revenue stopped and we had to kind of float off of things. So that has been a very useful thing for me, is like to pay more attention to the profit margin and not, I think it's ego, the ego of having a large team and all these offices and having this huge company. But if my profit margins weren't reflecting that, it doesn't make it worth it. I've got to make some decisions to change that. And I see this in fashion designers too, with you really want to be in this boutique or you want to do this fashion show because it's cool, right? You get to say you're in XYZ boutique and it's very fancy, and you get to have this fashion show and have all these people come and like go on stage. But you can do some of that to an extent, but you really have to pay attention to the ROI on each of those investments. Like if you are giving this boutique such a discount that you're not making any profit, and these shows that you're doing, you're not getting any sales, you have to be smart and make a business decision that you need to see more of an ROI. Fashion shows are fun, they're great, but they're not so profitable. It's really fun, like I said, you get to be on stage, things like that, but you want to make sure that you're paying attention to your ROI and your profits no matter what. Because yes, I've worked with some really large names, people that you would think are rolling in the dough, right? But when I get into the numbers and they see how they're operating their business while they have this brand and this name, they're not being as cost effective as they can on the inside. So their profit margins, I've seen larger profit margins with smaller companies, because the smaller companies are smarter about how they spend their money. So you want to be aware of that. And the last thing I'd like to say is I always thought right now everything's perfect. If it just stays the same forever, I'll be good. And yes, it sounds ridiculous to say that out loud, but that's what I was thinking, because every time a change would happen or something would shift, I would just flip out, and be like, oh my God, what am I going to do? And why is this happening? And da, 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 da. And then through owning the company long enough, I see that is part of being a business owner. That is part of being able to see a situation, figure out something different, and morph into making that a success story, and figuring out a way, if something doesn't work, figuring out a way that you can make something else work, or maybe you can make that work later, but always staying nimble and knowing that things aren't always going to be the same. They're not. Especially now with COVID, we've all seen that everything changed very, very quickly, and everyone had to pivot. And this won't be the last time that you'll have to pivot, and this won't be the last time that things change, because they're always changing, and a good business owner will see that and be able to change with it and be flexible with, this is what I wanted, but this is what it's going to look like. I also have never written a full business plan. That for me, I wasn't working with an investor. I never got a bank loan, so it wasn't necessary. If you're working with an investor or you're planning on getting some sort of loan, you will have to write out a full business plan. But for me, I really had to pay attention to, I had people tell me all the time, come into my business and be like, you have to do this, you have to do this, and it just never felt right. And I realized, had I made a plan, this is what my business is going to look like, and then I just followed that plan, I wouldn't be here. I wouldn't have expanded to New York. That wouldn't have ever been on my plan. I wouldn't have done online courses. That was never my plan. There were so many things that I wouldn't have planned out for, and letting myself follow my intuition, figure out what works, pay attention, morph and change as the environment did, that's what kept me creative. I do a goal sheet, a one-page goal sheet. I do it with all my clients too. So if you're interested in going through what my little one-page business plan looks like, you can contact me on Makers Row. It's makersrow.com/V-Mora, and I put that in the pin. But I do this with all my designers, one-page business plan, keep goals. I take a look at that. I can look at my one-page business plan from all of the years that I've been in business and see how far that I've grown. The sourcing district, Jay Aberman. If you didn't see me in the beginning, I talk about you, about how when I was new. Anyways, you're gonna have to rewatch it because everybody else saw it. But hi, Jay Aberman from the sourcing district. So yes, just being an entrepreneur, being able to morph and change and grow and not take things that would be, quote, failures, but learning experiences and being able to change them and grow from there. So that's all that I have. Yeah, so that takes us to the current. Right now I'm operating out of New York. We have smaller staff. We keep a lower number of clients. We give all of our clients the rockstar attention that they need, and patterns and samples and manufacturing. We also do branding, marketing, and social media, because what I was seeing was we were giving our clients this amazing product, but then they didn't have everything aligned for the photo shoots, the social media, and the sales. So we started helping there. That started a few years back. But really, we've been focusing more on that about the last year and a half. So yes, all right. I'm going to go and answer questions. Do you guys have any questions? I'm going to scroll through and see if I missed any. Let's see. What is the purpose of Embark? Okay, great. Embark has a platform where they have experts that they've chosen in different areas. We do product development and branding, but there's lawyers on there, there's accountants on there, there's sales strategy people on there. So you can go there, and all of these experts will have video content that you can browse. So tons of content. It'll be like a YouTube channel specific to the fashion industry. So you'll have all these little clips and videos with things that you can absorb and learn. And then if you find an expert that you want to hire, you can hire us directly through the Embark platform. There's like a button on there where you can schedule a time and talk to us and hire us directly. So sorry I didn't explain that more thoroughly. Okay. I see lots of waves. Thank you, Regina. Glad you enjoyed my stories. Like I said, it's like much more vulnerable talking about myself and how I got here. Like to put on the persona I was perfect all the time and I just did this and it's all been easy, but that's not true. Right before the breakthrough comes the breakdown. Yeah. So there's a saying, you've got to break down to break through. I love that saying. That came from a comment. How would you have done it had V.Mora not come together as it did? Can you feel that moment? Or is it just never ending pushing? What would I have done if V.Mora wouldn't have come together as it did? I don't know. Like I said, I didn't have a plan of like, this is what V.Mora is going to look like exactly. I don't know exactly what V.Mora is going to look like in 5 years now. I just know what works, and I try and do more of that, and I follow that. I try new ideas. If that doesn't work, then I try something different. So it's always kind of morphing. Like, yes, I am in the fashion industry where I started doing one-on-one coaching with designers, which is more, it's a little bit of like a life coaching gets in there. I took some training in just coaching, business coaching. That's new, but yeah, I don't know. I would have just morphed it to whatever else it turned out to be. But paying attention to what works. Where are you located? I'm in New York, on 38th between 7th and 8th. All right. Yes, hi, Jay. Do you handle baby carrier manufacturing? Yes, I do. One of my very first clients ever in life was Itsy Ritzy out of Chicago. They do all baby products. She was one of my very first clients that I started doing production management with long time ago. So yes. All right. Any other questions? Do you guys have any other questions for me before we pop off? I scrolled through. I don't see any. So questions. Going once. You can ask me anything. Going twice. Questions. All right. So no questions. Okay. Well, if you guys don't have any questions, you can watch this video later. You can reach out to me through Makers Row. Please check out Embark. And remember, your promo code for watching today is Anna, A-N-N-A. I'm sorry I missed the beginning. Like I said, so this will post to the IGTV stories. And what is V.Mora? V.Mora is a fashion product development company. We do pattern samples, business strategy, costing, things like that, and then we help with manufacturing, doing product development and production management. We do branding and social media, help with photo shoots. So basically a company that you can come to for all of your fashion designing needs, as in little or as small doses as you need. Okay. Perfect. Okay. Well, thank you so much, you guys, for listening to How I Built V.Mora. I hope that you got some tips on being a designer or entrepreneur yourself that you can apply to your own business. And you can reach out through Makers Row. Check out Embark. The promo code ANNA will help you get a membership. What is your hourly consulting rate? So if you want to contact me, it's anywhere if you're going to go through Embark, we are running our promotion where you can get 1 hour consultation with me for $165 an hour. Usually it's $275 an hour, but if you hire me through Embark, we're running that promo. And thank you. I hope to hear from you all soon. Okay, bye. Thanks, everyone. Okay.